Hello everybody, my name is Richard Smith, I'm the director of the Tank Museum, and today I'm going to be talking about one of my favourite things, which is a book. Now, having favourite things when you're a museum director is a bit tricky. So it's a bit like children, that even if you have a favourite, you're not meant to say which one it is, apparently. However, one of my real favourites in the entire museum is really based on the fact that, for those of you who've watched these videos before, you know that I've got a passion for First World War British Army history, and I see the First World War British Army as a centre of expertise and innovation and technophile progress. And if there's one object I possibly love more than any other to do with the First World War, it's the one that we're going to look at today. Now, if you call yourself a tank enthusiast and you have not heard of a chap called JFC Fuller, then for heaven's sake, don't admit it to anybody. Instead, go and get a book about him and read it. I would recommend the biography in 1979 by Anthony Trizzle, and learn about this guy quickly. Now, JFC Fuller, for those who are not brave enough to admit that you haven't heard of him, this guy is an absolutely pivotal figure in the story of armoured warfare. Born in 1878, he was a professional soldier, he was an infantryman and fought in the First World War. And he joins the Tank Corps shortly after its first going into action. He actually joins the Tank Corps on Boxing Day 1916, and he quickly becomes a central figure. He becomes the Chief of Staff of the Tank Corps, and he's the guy who comes up with the how they're used. He forms the whole picture of what armoured warfare should look like and would look like for decades to come. It is difficult to overstate the significance of JFC Fuller in our subject area. He is a giant, he is the demigod of armoured warfare who defines the area. This guy is to armoured warfare like Tim Berners-Lee is to the internet. He transforms how we see it into something else. Now, for historians, JFC Fuller is the gift that keeps on giving, because he's one of those people about whom there are no mild opinions whatsoever. You either think he's on one side, this demigod of armoured warfare, and those who think that are generally right, or, and possibly, and you think along the lines that I think, where I would normally describe him as a Satanist Nazi bigot. Now, some would debate this, or of course are a little overstated. However, I shall give you a quick run through what I mean by each of those. I promise I will start talking about the diary soon. So the Satanist bit, yes, a bit overstated, but while his soldiering opinions are often described, and actually particularly by himself, as unconventional, you could say exactly the same thing about his religious views. That Fuller had a really very well documented long association with a guy called Aleister Crowley, who was kind of the lead person in the occult world at the turn of the 20th century. And Fuller's association with Crowley is actually pretty tight. He meets him, he corresponds with him quite frequently, and he even gets to the point of illustrating the covers of some of Crowley's books. This isn't a passing association. He's really in to this occult world. The second part, so Satanist possibly, but certainly occultist. Nazi, this one's better documented and somewhat less controversial. The Nazi one, to be honest, is a bit of a corker. So Fuller's dalliance with fascism is very well recorded. In 1939, he attends Hitler's birthday parade in Germany. He even has a chat with Hitler about the tanks which are on show and are being inspected. But my favourite illustration is actually from a collection held in Rutgers University in New Jersey in the United States, because Fuller leaves a lot of his books and documents in Rutgers. He had a quite long association with them in the later part of his life. And we have a catalogue of material that's held in Rutgers, and this is a printout of the catalogue. And one of my favourite things on this is a list of his books that he owns. One of the book titles here, it says, British Union of Fascists, Constitution and Regulations by the British Union of Fascists and National Socialists. Okay, so he has the book about being a Nazi. This is 1936. But then it says, compiled under the direction of JFC Fuller. So Fuller doesn't merely have the book about being a Nazi in the United Kingdom. Fuller wrote the book about how to be a Nazi in the United Kingdom. And the nickname he has of Boney is partly because he has a very angular appearance, but it's also related to the fact that, for me, if you give someone a nickname Boney at the turn of the 20th century, this is, of course, the nickname of Napoleon Bonaparte. And it's just a little bit like, in the 21st century, giving someone the nickname Adolf. So we have Satanist, we have Nazi, but I hear you ask, how can you demonstrate that he's also a bigot? Well, I'm glad you asked me that, because this is one of my favourite things, because we have, at the Tank Museum, Fuller's own diary. So this is Fuller, in Fuller's words, in Fuller's handwriting, at the time at which he's becoming this pivotal figure in armoured warfare. And this is a wonderful, wonderful thing. So if you look at this diary, the first thing you notice is its sheer size. So, yeah, yes, this is a diary, but look at the thing. This isn't just a pocket notebook for some private jotting. Look at the size of it. This is a learned tome. This is the sort of thing you use to preserve the thoughts of a great man. This isn't written for Fuller's personal consumption. This is written for us. And today's video showed that it worked. The second thing you notice about it is the dates on the side. I don't know if you can see this, but it says here, this is from December the 4th, 1917. Now, this isn't a random date. December the 4th, 1917 is the day before the official close down of the Battle of Cambrai, which is normally seen as the 5th. So the decision would have been made on the 4th, and Fuller would have been part of that decision. So Fuller, at that point of this decision, makes his call of, really, my thoughts are so important, they deserve to be preserved. And he begins to write this diary at that point. Because, I mean, Cambrai is partly Fuller's concept. There's a couple of key concepts behind it, but Fuller himself is one of the architects. He sees Cambrai as a pivotal battle. This is his thoughts and reflections that follow the moment his name is made. But the best stuff about this diary is not the physical shape of it, but what it says. Because Fuller, he's an erudite guy, he's witty, cutting, amusing, and he's got a wonderful, wonderful way with words. He's self-educated, but he's immensely well-read, and he is enormously opinionated. And in this diary, he slags off everybody, and he slags them off wonderfully well. If you were in the General Staff and you're mentioned in here, it's unlikely to be complimentary. He refers to Douglas Haig, who's the head British soldier in the First World War at this point, as DH brackets dunderhead. He's got this cutting way with words. But arguably my favourite example of Fuller's way with words in this book comes from a crucial meeting that he holds in January 1918, where what happens is that JFC Fuller, the demigod, the definer of British armoured warfare, meets a guy called General Etienne, who is his French opposite number, and is actually just as pivotal a figure in French armoured warfare and its formulation in the First World War. And Etienne's importance, again, is similar and Fuller's. It's difficult to overstate. The main building in the French Tank Museum in Saumur is named after Etienne. So Fuller meeting Etienne, this is the big one. This is the titans of armoured warfare come across one another. The two people who've defined the subject area more than any other come face to face. If this was a football match, this would be the Barcelona of the early 21st century coming up against Oxford United of 1986. This is the big one of which there could be no comparison before or since. And fortunately for us, Fuller keeps a note of his impressions of this astonishing meeting. So let's have a look and see what Fuller says. So this is from the 16th of January 1918. And this is what Fuller writes as his reflections of that day and the day after. So he says, go to Compiègne with Hopblack. Hopblack is the intelligence officer for the Tank Corps. And inspect Tank HQ French. On the 17th of January, inspect their weapons. Excellent. Their big tanks are like kitchen ranges on tracks. Quite useless. Their small ones are merely very cleverly made mountings for battalion machine guns. The small Renault tanks are useless for a breakthrough, though they require too much infantry assistance. Okay. So we didn't get off to a good start on the equipment side, but then he records his impressions of Etienne. This is the key British guy, the mind, the thinking, the person behind how tank warfare was to evolve for the next 30 years. Meets his French opposite number, another pioneer of armoured warfare. Fuller writes this. General Etienne, the OC French tanks, is an ignorant and amusing little dud. Can only think in cannons and women and cannons. Wants to fill his tanks with 75s and his billet with chorus girls. His military abilities were very simple and inoffensive. He knows nothing of the science of war. Oh dear, that's a little bit unfortunate. And that's kind of what our chap thought about their chap. I did, however, bounce this passage past my French opposite number a year or two ago, and he made the observation that he would rather go to Etienne's parties than to Fuller's parties. It's a fair cop. So, okay, Fuller is fluent in his use of language and his ability to get stuck in to people. So what do we learn from this here in the 21st century? Well, Fuller is a revolutionary. He's seeing a different future to the one that those around him can see. And that doesn't work very well socially, and his colleagues in tank headquarters describe an evening with him as like baiting a rat, trying to get him to mouth off about his opinions on every subject under the sun. But here in the 21st century, we have a real challenge about people like Fuller, because today we want our experts to be nice. And in fact, here in the West, we want them to not only fit into social norms, but we want them to have slavish obedience and conformity to a politically correct worldview. And the trouble is, if we want that conformity and we want them to change the world, then we have a real tension that may not be reconcilable. So that if we want them to challenge the consensus, then they're unlikely to be the kind of people who are going to fit in neatly and quietly. So this book is a real treasure. This book is the reflections of a pivotal figure in our subject, in his own handwriting, written at the time of the peak of his powers. And to work in a place where this object lives is an unbridled privilege and one that fills me with joy. Thank you very much.
In these difficult times, obviously your support is really valued. So please do keep following us on social media, do subscribe to our channel, and if you've got the opportunity, perhaps order something from our shop, join one of our schemes like Patreon or our Friends organisation, and we'll try and keep going with giving you some content to keep you informed and entertained.